Let's do a thought experiment. Imagine there are two people running for office. One has a platform of minimal government, low taxes, and only spending on absolute essentials like defence, internal security and the court system. The other wants to raise taxes, raise spending, regulate industry, and get the government to do just about everything. Both candidates have a similar budget, are relatively charismatic, and have a strong core following. They just need to convince those who are not yet convinced. They have debates, hold rallies, and sell their policies to the masses. The media discusses each policy on its merits and gets feedback from the audience on what they like. Now imagine one of those candidates, the big government statist, has on their side a centre of propaganda funded by stealing money off the populace. More specifically, those members of society who produce wealth in the private sector that are far more likely to vote for small government. This propaganda centre pretends to objectively report on both sides, but it's blatantly obvious that it doesn't. And supporters of the statist candidate defend it vehemently. Meanwhile, it continues to steal people's money and use that money to spread big government propaganda. Would you consider this a fair and just situation? Of course you wouldn't. Yet, this is exactly what is happening right now with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, otherwise known as their ABC. In 1932, then Prime Minister Joseph Lyons officially launched the ABC. Starting out as just 12 Australian radio stations, it's grown into a behemoth of media. It now has TV stations, websites, shops, and even broadcasts overseas to go along with its radio network. It's completely funded by the taxpayer, so you'd expect it to remain apolitical. Unfortunately, this just isn't the case. In 2013, the University of Sunshine Coast conducted a survey of journalists from all around Australia, and the findings were startling but predictable. The journalism survey, the largest in 20 years, has found the profession is overwhelmingly left-leaning, with respondents from the ABC declaring double levels of support for the Greens compared with those from Fairfax Media and News Limited. The survey of over 605 journalists from around Australia found that just more than half described themselves as having left political views, while only 13% said they were right of centre. This tendency was most pronounced among the 34 ABC journalists who agreed to declare their voting intention, with 41% of them saying they would vote for the Greens, 32% declaring support for Labor, and 14% backing the coalition. So while journalism itself tends to attract people with left-wing views, the ABC tends to only attract those on the left. This is despite the fact that their charter requires them to provide broadcasting programs that contribute to a sense of national identity and inform and entertain and reflect on the cultural diversity of the Australian community. Then again, as we all know, diversity really means not white, not male, and not conservative. Either way, this is a taxpayer-funded media organisation. It has an obligation to remain balanced and representative of the entire population. Yet, in 2013, 41% of ABC journalists stated they voted for the far-left Greens Party that at the time was only getting 10% of the vote. Not only that, 32% declared they vote for the left-wing Labor Party. Contrast this with the fact that only 14% would consider backing the coalition that at the time was actually led by a Conservative. It is clear the ABC do not represent the cultural diversity of the Australian community in any sense at all. It represents the far left and no one else. It's not like the ABC have trended towards conservative views since 2013 either. They didn't have any mainstream conservative voices then, and they still don't have them now. Even the so-called small government party has never even tried to do anything about it until recently. At the 2018 annual Liberal Party Federal Council, grassroots members voted overwhelmingly to privatise the ABC. Not surprisingly, opposition leader Tits Shorten immediately took to Twitter to signal his virtue. The state will always protect its own, and when your position is simply to expand the power of the state, any threat to this needs to be fought. A far leftist defending their taxpayer-funded propaganda machine is not surprising. The response from senior Liberals is another story, with none of them willing to commit to privatisation. In response to the vote, Treasurer Scott Morrison said, "We listen and we consult with our members all the time, as we do with all Australians. But I should be very clear, the government has no plans to privatise the ABC." The Liberal Party are supposed to be the party of small government and deregulation, yet they have no plans to privatise a $1 billion a year taxpayer-funded propaganda centre that supports their direct political opponents. It's stupidly suicidal in so many ways. If a political party claims to be about small government, the only position they should ever have on state-funded media platforms is to sell it off or defund it. Especially when that media platform is openly hostile to their stated goals. The problem being, Turnbull and the senior Liberal leadership are just not small government types. It's also difficult to get real reform when older Conservatives in the media are still defending the ABC. However, Conservatives at least try to make reasoned arguments. We live in an era of almost unlimited access to media. Any individual can not only go online and get news, commentary, and other content at the click of a button for free, they can even make it themselves. Case in point, the video you're watching right now. I didn't need a $1 billion grant to make it happen. In fact, I made it essentially for free. On that note, if you want to donate, you can. My PayPal is listed below, no obligation at all, obviously. I also publish articles on XYZ, an independent news and commentary website set up by this weird demon supporter and a few other people, all built with little or no money, just time and dedication. David and all other XYZ contributors built it over years and we continue to grow all the time. If ABC journalists want to spew their far-left rhetoric, they are more than capable of doing so without stealing our money to do it. There is no valid case for using $1 billion a year to fund leftist propaganda, and if people really like the content, there is nothing stopping them from donating on their own. The ABC serves absolutely no purpose in society other than maybe an emergency broadcaster for remote communities. A task that we could fully fund for a fraction of the current cost. Privatise the ABC. Privatise the ABC now.
Okay, so how did they get across? Good question. Let's start with Ross. Ross is a male and he's straight and wealthy. He's in his mid-40s and he's rather healthy. His wife was born in a peaceful nation.
What do you mean we all pay for this? What? They take our money and use it on this rubbish? And people just accept it? That's ridiculous. Whatever, just put the footy back on.